Well, kids absolutely adore Marvel movies. There's a lot about this franchise that only grown-ups will appreciate. From tacky outfits and glossed-over casualties to an incessant barrage of quick-witted innuendos, here are some things in the MCU that only adults will notice. Between the mythological gods, radioactive monsters, and talking raccoons, it's pretty obvious that no one is going into a Marvel movie looking for a dose of realism. When it comes to space travel, though, believability gets stretched pretty far, even by the goofiest sci-fi standards. At this point, a fair number of humans have been shown making trips through space. Sometimes this has very real consequences, like when Tony Stark nearly died from a lack of oxygen, or when Peter Parker had to be saved before he was yanked out of the atmosphere by the Black Order spaceship. At other times, though, any of the problems while being in space or on an alien planet are completely ignored. When our very human heroes get to Thanos' homeworld of Titan in Avengers Infinity War, they're able to breathe just fine on an alien planet. The same goes for Vormir, when Hawkeye and Black Widow head over there in Endgame to find everything hunky-dory, physiologically speaking. The movies spend a lot of time on the pseudo-science that explains all of the strange phenomena throughout the MCU, but space travel seems to operate entirely on whatever seems convenient for the plot. Kids might not notice, but if you're old enough to have taken a science class or even read the original Infinity Gauntlet comics, while suffocating in the vacuum of space is a pretty big concern during these superhero battles, it's an easy detail to get hung up on. In most of their films, the Marvel masterminds have managed to keep a core of something believable within the context of their very unbelievable stories. Captain America: Civil War centers on a very realistic showdown built around relatable ideas of loyalty and betrayal, even if it also involves flying androids, robotic power armor, and teenagers with spider strength. In spite of it all, the serious tone of the film draws the audience past all that and into that emotional core. That doesn't change the fact that many of the superheroic struggles taking place throughout the MCU are ridiculously lopsided, however. Take the fight with Thanos on Titan. Endgame shows us that he's a villain that can hold his own against super powerful characters like Captain Marvel, even without the Infinity Gauntlet. But in Infinity War, the Mad Titan spends several minutes struggling against characters like Drax and Star-Lord. Sure, Drax is strong, but he's not strong enough to destroy an entire fleet of spaceships with his bare hands. And Peter Quill is really just a guy with laser guns and a comprehensive knowledge of classic rock. They're not exactly the biggest threats. It's not just that fight scene either. You can see the wildly imbalanced superpowers on display just by looking at the Avengers. On the one hand, you have characters like Black Widow and Hawkeye, who are incredibly skilled and deadly by regular human standards. On the other hand, you have the Hulk, who can punch out space monsters the size of a battleship, and Thor, the literal god of thunder. Kids like to see all their favorites standing shoulder to shoulder, but as adults we have to ask, is Clint Barton really contributing a whole lot to the fight? It doesn't matter if you're witnessing the epic climax of the film or even a fight between the heroes themselves, superheroic battles are almost always the focus of these movies. The consequences of those battles, however, are all over the map. Sometimes the lasting effects of a major encounter play an important part of the story, like the destruction of Sokovia in Avengers Age of Ultron. That one is treated as a massive tragedy with huge ramifications for the rest of the universe. For every scene like this, however, there are a dozen that never really bring up all the collateral damage that comes along with trashing armies of alien drones or swinging around magic hammers. The Battle of New York in Avengers, for instance, is shown to be so devastating that the World Security Council is willing to nuke Manhattan, which has to indicate a ridiculous number of casualties. And yet, once the credits roll, it's never brought up again. The same goes for the end of Captain America: The Winter Soldier, where SHIELD helicarriers are dropping out of the sky over Washington, D.C. and into the Potomac River. These are incredibly destructive events in highly populated areas, and as adults, that's the kind of thing we tend to think about once we're out of the theater. Here's a fun fact. If you're under the age of, say, 18, then you've never really experienced a pop cultural landscape that didn't feature the MCU. The characters, on the other hand, seem pretty well acquainted with the movies that hit theaters long before Tony Stark built himself a suit of super armor in a cave, even the younger ones.
Hey guys, you ever seen that really old movie? Empire Strikes Back?
Jesus, Tony, how old is this guy?
I don't know, I didn't carbon date him, he's on the young side.
The superheroes of the Marvel Universe are always throwing out references to classic movies, from Peter Parker's love of the Star Wars trilogy to Tony Stark referring to Thor as Point Break. We've even seen Captain Marvel crashing down to Earth in a blockbuster video, which for those youngsters among you was sort of like a Netflix that you had to physically drive to, and you could only watch the movie you wanted if you got there before everyone else got off work. That's exactly the kind of reference that today's kids just aren't going to understand. We've come a long way from the X-Men films of the early 2000s, where the characters swapped out their familiar, brightly colored comic costumes for allegedly functional black leather outfits.
You actually go outside in these things? What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
These days, we've all gotten used to seeing superheroes showing up on screen, looking just like their source material. But that doesn't change the fact that their outfits are often straight up ridiculous. That doesn't mean they look bad though. Without those colorful suits, the MCU would wind up being a pretty drab place. It's just that we never quite get why nobody chooses to dress in something a little more practical. Just look at Steve Rogers. His original costume is meant to be, well, a costume. It's specifically made for his onstage appearances selling war bonds. When he goes into action, however, he dresses more like a soldier for about 5 minutes. He's then given a slightly more functional version of his stage costume, and for some reason sticks with it when he wakes up in the 21st century too. Even when he goes underground after the events of Civil War, he keeps the same suit and just takes off all the white parts to go with the cool new beard. For a kid, all that makes sense. Cap looks like that because that's just what Captain America looks like. For the cynical, critical adult eyes though, we have to wonder why he doesn't just dress in a more tactical outfit. And for that matter, why Tony Stark doesn't just build everyone on the team a suit of armor, especially the ones who are very vulnerable to getting shot.
Can't have it.
Captain America Civil War is a great movie. It has one of the franchise's most memorable battles, introduces not one but two brand new major characters to the MCU, picks up on plot threads from Age of Ultron, and ties together the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe while still focusing on its title character and how far he's willing to go to help his friends. It also seems on the surface like it's a perfect movie for kids to get excited about. After all, Spider-Man has always been a favorite for younger fans, and what kid wouldn't be excited to see Ant-Man growing up to giant size during that unforgettable airport battle in Germany? The rest of the movie, on the other hand, might not be ideal for that particular audience. In addition to being built around the fact that Captain America's best friend just straight up murdered Iron Man's mom and dad, most of the plot of Civil War is a debate about government oversight. As exciting it is to see Captain America bicep curling a helicopter, having two characters argue over whether they should submit to authority or remain independent in order to follow their own moral compass and pursue a more proactive interventionist policy is, well, it's not exactly what the elementary school set is excited about. And that's before you get to the part where the main villain is doing everything simply because he craves death. Yikes. Fortunately, anyone who was a little too young for all that probably just remembers how cool it was when Ant-Man rode on Hawkeye's arrow. It's just like the comics. It's not unusual for a movie that appeals to kids to throw in some jokes for the grown-ups in the audience, and with the kind of cross-generational appeal that has led to record-breaking box office totals, the MCU movies are no exception. The thing is, in these movies, all those adult jokes are, well, really adult, especially when they're coming from Tony Stark and Peter Quill. Iron Man always has a sarcastic retort ready for any situation, like when he asked Black Widow and Hulk if they were playing Hide the Zucchini, or when he took a swipe at Hawkeye for having a little difficulty lifting up Mjolnir.
We won't hold it against you if you can't get it up.
Star-Lord, on the other hand, makes Tony look like he could be teaching Sunday school. In a movie that features a talking raccoon, you know, for the kids.
Oh, yeah.
The Guardians leader mentions that his starship will look a lot like a Jackson Pollock painting underneath a blacklight. If you're an adult, you already get it, and that's just the tip of the innuendo iceberg. Fortunately, these are exactly the kind of jokes that are going to go right over the kids' heads, unless of course they have reflexes like Drax.
Nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast. I would catch it.
If the past 10 years have proven anything, it's that kids love Iron Man. There are plenty of reasons why too. He's a modern-day knight in literal shining armor, with a seemingly endless personal fortune and enough smarts to literally invent a new element in his basement. He's a cool exec with a heart of steel. And hey, Spider-Man likes him too, so all the other kids should too, right? Not exactly.
You missed me. I missed it too. Blow something up. I already did that.
Tony Stark's entire character arc over the course of 10 years of movies is built around some very adult-oriented themes, many of which might be missed by younger viewers who are busy focusing on the glitz and glamour of the Iron Man armor. The man started as a playboy who was constantly womanizing and drinking without a care in the world. He treated people like garbage and didn't blink twice at the moral struggle of living off of a fortune built on dealing weapons. Even after he made his change and started to reforge his personality into one of the greatest superheroes in the entire MCU, his story remained just as adult in nature. In Age of Ultron, he dealt with a world that was suddenly a whole lot bigger than he thought by making huge mistakes. And Iron Man 3 is a movie entirely about post-traumatic stress disorder. Even in his final moments, his inner struggles continued until he accepted that he'd have to sacrifice his own life, and any chance of seeing his daughter grow up, to save everyone else. Without a doubt, the quantity of high-minded, adult-level material in the Stark storyline is overwhelming. But hey, that armor's pretty cool, right? Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.